This is the Between Night Visitors Part 9, I believe we're on. And it's, for viewers of the video, it has been a few weeks since we have played together, so we might have to take a little bit more time with our recap. Adrian was not here last time and so missed some of the key action. And also, David is making a brand new character today. So we have a lot of like housekeeping on the plate today. So I'll try to pause the video where it needed or pause the recording so that people watching the video don't have to listen to the boring stuff. But let's do the recap though. So the sort of main thing that happened last time was Hargrave House, most of Hargrave House, 3/4 of it, went into the Fragrant Void and resolved the Waitley camera threat. This was a wild sequence where all kinds of crazy shit happened, but it all sort of ultimately culminated in facing the entity that is inside the Waitley camera. That's one thing that happened. Another thing that happened is you all have access to a brand new custom move, or a brand new move called Voidwalker, which I will put the text in the move sheet at some point. And then most importantly, I think, is that Mr. Nelson did not return. Mr. Nelson is retired as a character. So Green, you were operating the camera while the rest of the group was in the Fragrant Void. That's what we decided you were doing. So it was a great session. It was a wild session. It's very, very different from what we've done. There was no unseen, for example. It's very just unusual scene. So we have to do a few things. Let's continue with the recap though. So I think that we're going to be picking up like basically just like a number of days after the events of last time. And Patrick Fig is still at large. And so you need to figure out how to wrangle Patrick Fig. The creature of Cremorne Gardens is still at large. You still have to figure out if the creature is real or is it a hoax. And we're going to be introducing a brand new threat, the Cursed, which is in play because of the American playbook. So we'll be kind of doing that in a bit. As far as Theodora goes, of interest to you, Green, Theodora had a gigantic, enormous amount of sapphire blue fabric delivered to Hargrave House. It's like just bolts and bolts of it, just like in different patterns and stuff, just piled up in the foyer. And we'll be talking about that as well. And so taking a look at our returning hunters, we don't have Dan today, so we will not have Mr. Taliford for now, but Green, you have the conditions marked by Laurtensia Fig. I think you can go ahead and remove that if you wish, since Laurtensia is no longer part of the active threat. And always the last to leave. This was literally true last time because you did not leave Hargrave House while they went to the Fragrant Void. And then Mr. Quinn, you have Most Beloved, of course. And I think that's where we sort of stand with characters. So at this point, we should probably decide, David, what are you looking at as far as your brand new playbook? What are you thinking you want to do?
I pulled up one of the character keepers because I don't, for whatever reason, I don't think the one we're using has access to the Unquiet. At least I couldn't figure out where it was.
I just put it on there. It's
oh,
on
did you?
Now.
Yeah. So I'm looking to play the Unquiet. So I'm intending to be a ghost.
I love it. Yeah, just scroll over all the way to the right. It's there. So you have a teal blue column. And so, yeah, you'll need to make your character. Why don't you go ahead and just start doing that? And I think we'll just pause the recording for a bit. Okay, so we have a character now. So David, let me read the little color text really quickly. I'll note here that the Unquiet, the playbook you're playing for people watching the video, is part of the season 2 of the Between. It's not in the core rules. Season 2 of the Between is available on the Gauntlet Patreon. So, you were a resident of Hargrave House many decades ago. But now, ghosty ghost, you're dead. In fact, you met in an untimely end as the result of a betrayal by one of your contemporaries. The arrival of that traitor's descendant in London has awakened you, restless spirit, and anchored you to Hargrave House, which you'll haunt until you can exact your revenge by destroying said descendant. In the meantime, you find yourself drawn yet again to the dark work done by Hargrave House, and these new hunters could certainly use your help. You might even be able to summon the energy needed to temporarily slip your spectral bonds and stalk the streets of London once again. So, tell us just the basics about Ambrose Sylvestris, a hunter from even before Mr. Quinn's time, right?
Well before. Ambrose Sylvestris is quite old for a ghost, even. What kind of detail would you like? I know that there's an element of the between that is often revealing things through masks. So
yeah, the main thing is you can't talk about anything that's in the Mask of the Past until you select the Mask of the Past. But that stuff is actually pretty focused on the past of Hargrave House more than your past. I would just occlude, in particular, the details about the hunter at that time who betrayed you. Keep that to yourself for now. But you can sort of otherwise just tell us the basics, just kind of the basics, look and all that kind of stuff. Things that you might know about you.
Okay. So Ambrose, there's a bust in the library of Hargrave House that sits upon one of the shelves. There's a neat little wooden bookend that keeps the books from knocking it off. But that bust is sort of like from the chest up. It has a shawl or some similar garment around the shoulders on the bust, and then a bit of a collar, and then the facial features. Ambrose has like a very striking nose and a very full beard and mustache combination that extends down well below his chin, with sort of rolling locks behind. And he's got a hat, a small. It sort of hovers around more the back of his head. I've got a picture for everyone in the chat, or I guess in the document. But that's sort of the look I'm going for. Anyone who's like a student of history would know that his hat is certainly medieval in origin, and one would assume that his personage was then as well.
Love it, thank you. You also have 2 moves, which are pretty important to the character, so we should talk about them. The first is the Phantom. You are anchored to Hargrave House. You may roam about the interior of the mansion, but if you manage to leave, you will return involuntarily at dawn. While in the house, you may openly converse in a disembodied voice through one of the following mediums, the bust of your likeness. You can summon enough spectral energy to temporarily break free from your ghostly bonds or interact with the world in ways that are more physical in nature. Whenever instructed to do so, either by myself or another move, you mark this energy track that you have. When the track is full, you must spend the next day phase recovering in the spirit realm. You can take no actions while in the spirit realm, nor can you interact with other characters. However, during other hunter scenes, you should describe how your residual spectral energy is subtly affecting the environment. Additionally, you gain a clue while you're in the spirit realm. And so you have this energy track. You are otherwise, during the day phase, you can only speak through the bust, right? Unless you manage to manifest in some way by spending your spectral energy. You do have one move that lets you automatically sort of like tap into that spectral energy straight away, which is called Made Flesh. During the Dusk Phase, you can mark 2 boxes on your track to pull together enough ectoplasm to appear as a solid living person dressed in clothes from the period you died in, along with any personal quarters items you wish. Oh, you do have personal quarters items, okay. While in this form, you can leave Hargrave House, touch things, be touched, communicate normally, and suffer injury. This physical manifestation ends during the Dawn Phase. If you are killed in this form, you immediately return to Hargrave House as a ghost and take the condition shaken. So that is where we find you. I do think it would be fun to have some personal quarters stuff. Based off what we know about you I think there are some other things in the library that we now realize are yours. Um, I think each of us, Adrian, Alicia, and myself, will define something from that.
I think there's a decorative sword. It's not sharp, but that's what you sometimes are carrying around, it seems.
I'm going to suggest that you have I think there's a book that always falls off the shelf in the library. And the book is it's basically like a very ancient medieval text on like monstrous entities.
I think that there's a portrait, like a hand-painted portrait of a child, but whenever you enter the room, the face gets blurred out.
Nice, love that. So now we have to figure out how you get introduced into Hargrave House. The group has been essentially recovering for a few days because of their experience in the Fragrant Void. Mr. Taliford's been missing. And you still have these sort of active threats out in London, but they're not like Patrick Fig and the creature are not like super pressing, dangerous threats, right? Not yet anyway. Patrick never really will be. And so things are not quite at a lull, but pretty close to a lull until, of course, we introduce the curse, which we'll do in a bit. I am curious. I think I'd like to know, first of all, Green, what have you been doing the last few days? And how did you start to realize that the bust could talk?
I think busying themselves. So Green, after all of these events, has been more than usual busying themselves with cleaning up in Hargrave House and kind of putting things in order. Also, a perfect kind of really making Mr. Nelson's room into like a perfect welcoming space for when he returns. Right, so that's kind of the way I think that Green is dealing with it, and also, of course, in the library, kind of things. The last couple of weeks have been busy, so things was probably lying around. So, and then maybe at a certain point, Buzz began to speak.
And I'll ask you, as an aside, but I'm curious, what did you do with all that fabric?
Let's see. Maybe Green. Well, okay. So I think clearly, since Green, as we know, has a history as a tailor, I think Green made new curtains for the library.
And Theodora's favorite color. Love it. I think I'd just like to have a scene with Green and Ambrose in the library. Maybe Green discovering Ambrose revealing himself to Green.
I think Green, while kind of working there and doing things, sometimes mutters these pieces of comedy dialogue to themselves, like or stops in their tracks and kind of delivers this little monologue, that sort of thing, to the empty room.
I think one of those times from like off to your right, out of your peripheral vision where the bust currently is, you just hear a voice say, "Your acting's improving."
I think Green, they turn around and see no one, nothing, shake their head and kind of continue cutting some fabric.
But those curtains are dreadful.
I think Green stands up and kind of turns around. Is it directly obvious where the voice comes from?
I think you can like positionally tell where it is. Something that's not clear from the move. Does the bust, like, does the face move, or does the voice just come from it?
It's up to you, whatever you want.
I love it's very like Muppets, but I kind of like the idea of the face moving on the bust, right? So I think Ambrose sort of like angles with his eyebrows and like points at the where you've like exchanged the drapes on one of the windows for the blue.
Green takes a step back and then says like, does the color not work for you? Is it?
It reminds me of something dreadful. Perhaps a sage or plum?
Well, sometimes we have to do with what we got, and we have a lot of this fabric right now.
Well,
I
I'm sure
don't
it
think
was
you have spoken
affordable.
before.
This might be a nice time to get Mr. Quinn involved. Mr. Quinn, I think you might walk by the library and overhear Green talking to himself in the library. Seemingly talking to him, or to themselves.
So what I hear, not knowing that it comes, of course, from our new ghost friend, is the suggestion that the curtains be sage. And I'm going to burst into the room and be like, absolutely not. You know how I feel about sage. That is not an acceptable interior home decor color, Green.
Yes. Look, Sapphire, I agree. But this gentleman here seems to have a different opinion.
If you feel that strongly, I vote for the plum.
And I'm just gonna like turn to our new Muppet friend, I guess, and be like, okay, so this is happening.
I just spend a lot of time in this room.
And you like sage?
In preference to the sapphire.
My lord, may I present Mr. Quinn, the head of this house?
I will note here, Ambrose, that during your time, there were no heads of Hargrave House. Everyone was equal, right? That's true today as well. But
Ambrose will raise a quizzical eyebrow. And when exactly is that? When are we?
Well, in London, I think, of course, in our beautiful century of progress and inventions and many things. You look
the 12th
different.
century, then? That was a lovely time. Is a lovely time? Is that where we are?
It's the 19th, my lord.
I have been gone a while. And the bust like sort of like rocks on the on the shelf.
Not to be rude, sir.
Yes, certainly.
Why are you in our bust?
Well, I had it made of me. I thought it was a good look.
I'm just saying that it's very rude to just enter someone's home without an invitation.
Oh, sorry. I'm Ambrose Silvestris. This is my room. I built it on this house.
Green, can you please check the records for this Ambrose person? You're welcome to stay should that be true, of course.
I certainly will, and I think Green will walk over to like some history of Hargrave House section and start looking through books there. Maybe see if we can find some information about this person.
Indeed.
I went by many names. Hopefully that's the one on record.
Convenient.
I love it. All right, so now that we've met Ambrose, I am going to introduce the brand new threat. Our new threat is called the Cursed. Your companion, Mr. Nelson, succumbed to their terrible curse. Their limbs grew long, razor forelimbs. Their head distended into one with mandibles and rows of glittering eyes. Their body became broad, bulbous, covered in a fine, shaggy fur. You've had a few days to look into this matter, and it's clear to you now that Mr. Nelson was what is generally known as a lycanthrope. And you thought you left it in the Fragrant Void, but maybe not. In the last couple of nights, you're starting to hear stories that are becoming increasingly alarming. A bricklayer, for example, named David Hawkins, was found eviscerated at a building site on Baker Street. And there were reports of a giant spider. A sex worker, Miss Elvina Tompkins, claims to have seen a terrible monster like a giant spider stalking around Clapham Common, where she plies her trade until very recently. And a wealthy judge living at 14 Portman Square, Judge Sidney Thornwick, claims to have chased this spider-like beast from his home, and that he put several bullets in it, and it did not die. Now, your approach to stopping the creature that you believe is Mr. Nelson will depend quite a lot on whether Mr. Nelson's transformation is permanent or reversible. I'm going to pose a question to Mr. Quinn. Mr. Quinn, the beast will eventually return to Hargrave House, which is when you can all make your move against it. How do you know for sure Mr. Nelson in this form will come back?
When we were in the Fragrant Void, we saw those like tether type things. And I think that I feel like I still see that. And that there's that tether that was his seems to be leading from our door out about the city.
So he's still connected to Hargrave House in a sort of cosmic way, an astral way. I like that. You have a threshold question here, which is this transformation permanent or is it reversible? You got to figure that out first, because that has a bearing on how you deal with Mr. Nelson. So you have a few leads, and I'll update the character sheet with all this stuff in a bit. we are a little more pressed for time today than normal, so I think we'll just do kind of a quick day phase with one scene each, and then we'll roll straight into dusk. So, Mr. Quinn, what would you like to do today for your scene?
I think that I'm still extremely fucked up from the events of the Fragrant Void and all of that shit that went down. So I think I'm gonna chase a spider lead. I think I'm gonna go talk to someone. One of the people. I don't care who. One of the people who saw the spider.
So you have the building site at Baker Street where this builder was found apparently murdered by it. You have the sex worker, Miss Tompkins, at Clapham Common, which is just like a little park. And then you have the judge, Sidney Thornwick, if you want to take a more aristocratic upper class approach.
Well, that's going to be the one that I take,
obviously. Very good. Okay. Figured you might. So 14 Portman Square. I'll note that here for now. And what are you going to do today, Green?
I think trying to get a better understanding who that Ambrose fellow is by reading some more books.
Very good. Doing some research. And Ambrose, what are you able to do? What are you going to do today?
I think Ambrose, I think while Green is like looking for the records, I think they're just going to like fall off the shelf for him. And he's going to like pepper Green with questions while he's doing the research to get up to date on like what London is like now and all that.
I like it. Good. So you could like be researching like basically any of the threats right now with all the stuff in the library. I like it. Let's take a quick 5-minute break and then we'll come back and do those scenes. I was just reminded of something, or I was just thought of something on the break, Adrian, which is the ritual to get the camera to work required Hargrave House to perform a comedy, which we imagined Green was directing. So just a little bit of extra character stuff for you there. So let's talk about 14 Portman Square, the home of Judge Thornwick, who was, according to the story, attacked by the creature. I think I'm going to just skip straight ahead and say that you're let in by a maid. Her name is Poppy. She has red hair. She's absolutely just wild with freckles. She smells of lavender, despite the fact she's called Poppy. She lets you in, and how can you tell, Mr. Quinn, that Poppy is like a little taken with you? Maybe a lot taken with you.
So I think that being so messed up from what happened, what with turning down all of that godlike power to stay with my friends and then having that go very poorly, I have decided that I, in honor of Mr. Nelson, should wear his clothes. And so I have raided his room for the best threads that I could find of his, which are not the best in any way. But so I've got like a long jacket and a hat. But underneath that, I'm still very done up. My perfect hair. I actually had like some flamboyant, brightly colored makeup put on. And so I think that you can tell that Poppy is taken with me because despite my outrageous appearance, and in my opinion, this disgusting appearance, she's still, she keeps trying to touch me. I think that's it. It's like a flirty touching, which of course I just keep backing away from.
Yes, I love it. It's good. I paint the scene about 14 Portman Square. At the outset, I'll tell you that it's very, everything is very dark, shiny wood. There's a very impressive bookcase in one room filled with legal tomes. And one hallway has busts of famous legal scholars on plinths, keeping with our bust theme. And my paint the scene question, 14 Portman Square was the site of a violent haunting that former residents of Hargrave House, although perhaps you're one of them, Mr. Quinn, still, former residents of Hargrave House had to deal with. In what ways has 14 Portman Square been permanently scarred from this incident when Hargrave House got rid of the ghosts at 14 Portman Square?
No watches or clocks work at all in this house.
I imagine that no matter how many times they try to like cover it with wallpaper or paint or like paneling, blood that had been dribbling down the walls keeps feeling like it seeps through, like this hint of a stain.
I think that no candles or gas lamps or anything like that can stay lit. Like they go out within an hour or two.
So it's also very dark in the house, which is interesting. Good. We'll come back to this in a moment. So it sounds like this scene is taking place with the two of you in the library, right? Obviously you're there, Ambrose, but Green, it sounds like you're also in the library going through books. So let's just have that scene.
I think this is the tome you need, and like a large leather-bound volume slides off the shelf and just falls to the floor, open on its spine.
Since Green still has no idea who that person actually is, they say like, "Thank you, my lord. I'm still perfectly capable of." And in any case, thank you for your help. And like slowly, they pick up that volume.
Yeah, it's like probably just a Hargrave House ledger of some kind that just details some basic entries. It's sort of like if you kept a journal of, updates to the building or the grounds over time, that sort of thing.
What about you tell me a bit more about well, what drove you to make this bust or have it made?
Well, when I was a younger man, I was vain. I was quite vain, if I'm being completely honest. And I had a quite lovely sculptor request to make the bust, and I was flattered. I was quite taken by the finished product, and I gave it a place of honor. I discovered sometime later that it had been designed by an enemy of mine, used to spy on me, but I made short work of that enchantment, and, well, it was a very good likeness, so I kept it. What do you do here?
Oh, well, everything I can to keep this house running like it has for many centuries, it seems.
Yes, I've seen you in and out of here quite a lot. What is the business of Hargrave House these days?
Oh, we engage in all sorts of well, we deal with trouble in the city, you know?
Interesting troubles? I haven't
Yes,
been
most of them
out
are quite interesting.
much. Anything in particular plaguing you right now? Anything interesting recently?
Well, you know, I've been thinking about this family of pie makers. They, well, two of them were horrible people, and we already found them. But the third of the siblings is still on the loose. It has everything for the penny papers, cannibalism, murder, all of this stuff.
Oh, how horrible. Tell me more.
Well, we are looking for a man who fancies himself some sort of animal. And there is a whole swine cult, and it's all very complicated. But what is it to you?
Oh, well, I once aided others, aided this house in the hunting of, sounds like, more interesting things. Man eating other man is, well, that's just what they do, right?
That feels like a good cut. Let's go back to Judge Thornwick's place, 14 Portman Square. Sidney Thornwick he comes to meet you, Mr. Quinn. He has a ruddy complexion. He has wooden teeth, big gray mutton chops. And he says, you're from Hargrave House, are you not?
Yes, sir, I am.
Yes. Well, then you, of course, remember that a number of years ago, I was able to acquire the services of Hargrave House to rid this place of a quite nasty ghost.
Yes. Now that I'm here, I do remember that. Didn't exactly go according to plan, did it? Well, it all worked out in the end, though.
As these things always do. Mr. Quinn, yes?
Yes, I'm sure you've heard of me.
Well, of course. Who hasn't? And though this is a bit of a casual look for you, isn't it?
Well, we must always keep society on its toes, sir.
Fair enough. Well, I'm afraid that I have the story that's going to keep society on the edge of their seats right now. That terrible beast. I barely survived my encounter with it.
Yes. Well, I heard about it. I'm sure that it was most terrifying, especially to someone, who doesn't have the kind of experience that Hargrave House has. Would you mind telling me a little bit about what happened?
Well, did you know I put 4 bullets in that thing? And that was after running it through with the saber I keep on the mantle. A memento from my army days. What a magnificent and terrifying creature it must be, impervious to bullet and blade and strong enough to rip the back door off its hinges. Poor Poppy had a real fright, though, let me tell you. The thing was in her room when I found it.
You stabbed it.
And shot it several times.
An interesting impulse. It was in Poppy's room, you say? Do you mind showing me?
Well, yes. Poppy, perhaps you could take her there, or him there, and Poppy will take you take you upstairs. She's just like going on. She's like, it was just standing there, staring with its red glowing eyes. But it wasn't staring at me, even though I was lying right in front of it. It was looking sort of above me. Like there was something there, floating above me. I was frozen in terror, but snapped out of it when the judge charged in from behind with his sword from the army.
Can I sort of tap into this astrally thing that I've got going on and see if I can see the tether anywhere around here?
I mean, this might be a good justification for using Voidwalker.
Yeah.
Let me I haven't put the text in the keeper yet, so I'll just read it off to you. Give me a moment to pull it up. But it feels like a good time for it. That's in the Waitley camera. Okay, so Voidwalker. When you have the cosmic passage marked, do you?
Yeah.
And use an object of power to attune to the Fragrant Void, we'll have to decide what that is, roll with sensitivity. On a hit, you'll travel to the Fragrant Void and gain keen insight into a threat of your choice, and I reveal 2 clues. On a 10 plus, no entity from the void will disturb you. On a miss, you unmark the cosmic passage and then cross it off your sheet. So,
Oh boy.
the stakes are high on this, but there are 2 clues in play. So,
Yeah.
What's the object of power, though? Is it something from your collection, perhaps?
I was actually gonna say, can it be something that I've taken from Mr. Nelson, since you know, he was lost more or less to the void, that like sort of attuning to him is the object of power. So something that I've taken from him, I guess. Maybe the hat.
I like that. Let's just look at his personal quarters, what might be like appropriate. The gun, the golden railroad spike, be a good one.
Yeah, let's do the golden railroad spike.
Good. Go ahead and roll with what is it? Sensitivity?
That is my sensitivity. Oh no, I gotta bump that up. Oh, that's a 9. Oh, but it was 2 clues on a 10.
You get on a hit, you get 2 clues. You get the 2 clues. The problem with the not getting a 10 plus is that an entity from the void will disturb you.
No, it's fine. I'll leave it. Okay. We'll have a little chaos.
Sounds good. We'll come back to this. Let's go back to the other scene. So Green, I'm going to give you an information move since you are researching things. So go ahead and roll that. With reason.
That's a 7.
And Ambrose, I'll give you an information move too, if you can tell me how you're doing it.
I think as Ambrose is asking Green questions about the different things they've been dealing with, I think other books will start popping off the shelves, and Ambrose will be like, "Oh, let me refresh myself," and like will conduct. I imagine like as a ghost, he doesn't have to so much flip through and read the pages quite as much. But I think like as an impact of him visiting the books, they just sort of get knocked off the shelves as he reads through them.
Nice, good. I like it. That's probably going to cause you to mark a spectral track, but let me read the thing here. Yeah, mark 1 box on your phantom. But go ahead and roll with reason for information move.
That's a 12.
Nice. We'll come back to that in a moment. And Green, you got a mid result, yes?
7, yes.
Yeah. We'll do that first. You're just researching stuff about Hargrave House and trying to learn more about Ambrose, but you're essentially stumbling on a clue about one of the threats. Do you have a threat in particular you want for that to be the case?
I think we've been talking about the figs, so I think that would probably relate to that. And it might be maybe like a book about the London Zoological Garden that gives let's see. Yeah, maybe. I think maybe like a history of the zoological garden, that where all the expansions that they built over the years and that so on are. So it's kind of like a blueprint for the zoological garden.
Oh, interesting. I'm curious what made you start going through this particular book. Why did you choose this? Or why did this, is it just because Ambrose dropped it in your lap? Or
I think no, I think because I wanted to like learn something about the history of if there are any pigs or like special pigs or so kept at the zoological garden, something like this.
Let me take a look at my list of clues. It might be a little tricky based on how you described it, but I will say that I don't know that the book is turning up anything particularly interesting about something that might be connected to the figs. It's probably just too much temporal space, to be honest. But I do think it's interesting that you are reading and there is an entry that talks quite a lot about birds making nests, and in particular, how little objects that would be viewed as just like nothing particularly exciting or detritus or just, just some little small object, at one point were disappearing because some of the birds were like creating nests out of these objects. And I think that this will line up nicely with something you've noticed in recent days, ever since basically Hargrave House was on the figs radar, which is little tiny things have started going missing. Little shiny objects, little pieces of cutlery, things like that. And maybe there's a connection. I'll make a note of that clue. Now, doesn't mean that Patrick thinks he's a bird. Lots of creatures create nests, but that's just a thing to note. I have noted small objects going missing, perhaps to make a nest. And Ambrose, which of the threats is your focus?
I think he finds the thought of cannibalism to be totally mundane, but he's intrigued by the concept of this fishman creature of Cremorne Gardens. That sounds so interesting to him. So he'll huck some books off the shelf that relate to anything around that. Like if there's any details about the city in Cremorne Gardens, if there's anything about fish creatures or those who worship fish gods, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that. Take a quick look here.
Oh, I need to grab the door real quick. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead. It's fine. Gives you minutes to look anyway. We haven't established whether the creature is real or a hoax yet, have we? Got a pretty straightforward clue here, though. back to that once David gets back. So, Mr. Quinn, you're in the house, but you're in the Fragrant Void version of the house. What does that look like?
I think that the color has been drained away a lot. So it's not black and white, it's more like sort of like sepia toned, and everything feels like it's like jello, like it's just kind of got like a wobble to it.
How interesting. You are walking through this sort of parallel dimension version of 14 Portman Square. I owe you 2 clues. The first is that you can see very bright because they seem to burn with like an internal fire. You can see cats out on the street, but the sort of void version or the sort of astral plane version of these cats, they burn with this fire in their eyes, and they are gathering to a normal, in the normal world, it wouldn't seem like much. It would just seem like a bunch of feral cats, like just kind of like together. But you can tell here that they are gathering either for safety or for war. That is your first clue, Re the Cursed.
While I'm walking through this void, can I call out for Mr. Nelson?
Sure. Doing so, you get no response. However, you do see what appears to be, you start to get these like dream images that appear before you. And in particular, above Poppy's bed, you see an image of a butterfly going back into its chrysalis, but it's a large butterfly, going back into its chrysalis and sealing itself up as if to reverse its transformation. But then a pair of razor's spider forelimbs reach down and scoop up that large chrysalis into the shadowy darkness. But that's your clue. A butterfly going back into its chrysalis. And because we're not done here, you see a column of blood wobbling, wavering in that way you've described. The column of blood is approaching you. You know already it's Julius. He sticks his face out of the blood as best he's able. It's hard for him, but he does it. And he says, "Oh, Mr. Quinn, you're back. Will you be visiting us regularly?"
I have no interest in visiting you, Julius, or talking to you, or even remembering that you ever existed. I'm only here for Mr. Nelson.
I might know a little something about that.
I don't believe you.
Come close and I'll whisper it to you.
I will cautiously step forward.
Closer. Lean in. He
All right,
expects
yeah.
do you lean in?
Yeah.
You're very close. His face just breaking the surface of this column of blood. And that's when he makes his move. He thrusts his arm out and tries to grab you and pull you in. What do you do?
Can I try to stab him with my golden railroad spike? It got me
Absolutely.
here.
Yes, you can. Take the night move, actually, but you can take it at advantage because of the golden railroad spike. It'll be vitality.
Okay. Oh, that's not good. That's a 7.
A 7. 8.
Sorry, 8.
I'm just going to give you a condition. You can stab him with the golden railroad spike, but not before he ejects a large amount of his blood into your mouth and down your gullet. Just like, you're taking a little bit of him back with you to the material world.
And get rid of this fucker.
If you're okay with it, that is. You can always
Yeah, I'm
mark
fine
down
with
his
that,
pass.
yeah.
But
Yeah.
give me the scene, though. How do you like dispatch him?
Yeah, so I lean in and he lunges at me, and I literally gonna be like, I fucking knew it. And I've got I feel like I was prepared for it. So I had my hand like in the coat, in Hank's coat, and I just like I take it out, and I'm not a trained fighter. I might be very old, but I don't get my hands dirty. So it's like a bad slashing thing that I'm doing, which is why he gets, I think, in on me before I can get him. And it's just it's a comical like motion as I'm trying to like slash and stab him, and I feel like I get him just by chance, not by skill.
And you snap back to 14 Portman Square out of the Fragrant Void. Poppy is there, and she says, "Are you okay, Mr. Quinn?"
I feel like I'm probably like white as a sheet at this point in time. And I'm trying to like brush off what I feel like is like blood that got on me, although I don't know if it's still like visible now that I'm like back. And after that like moment of like, whew, you know, and I'm like checking my gloves, and I'm like, yes, I'm fine.
You must have bit your lip or something. And she has a handkerchief and she gently dabs Julius's blood from the corner of your mouth.
I'm gonna grab her hand and like take the handkerchief and be like, don't touch that.
And she says, "Oh, all right. And I've given you the condition, the blood of Julius." And I think we'll just end that scene there. Let's cut back over to, you stepped away, David, but you got a clue. Your clue, you found in the book some depictions, some stories of, and then depictions, renderings of, Scrimshaw showing a fishman rising out of the water, suggesting that there are such things, or at least historically, sailors believe they saw such things. I also owe you a Mastermind Clue as well. And the Mastermind Clue is very straightforward. I think the Mastermind Clue is the sapphire blue curtains in the library. It is quite simply the idea that Theodora is subtly injecting herself into Hargrave House. It may be something that you're aware of directly, or just be something sort of cosmically we're aware of with Hargrave House, but that is the clue.
I definitely think that Ambrose is more than put off by the curtains. Like, so he feels something weird about them, for sure.
Absolutely. And Green, because I owe you a complication on your clue, I'm going to say your coin, your French coin from the Napoleon era is missing. You can leave it on your sheet, but just put a note that it's currently in Patrick Fig's possession. You believe. And I think with that, we shall head into the Dusk Phase. Ghost of Hargrave House. Green.
Sorry, I was noting down that. So let's see.
I've been working hard to mark items for you now, Green.
Yes. I think I'm as part of like the let's see. Does it make sense that another sign while that Hank is still around is that this pocket watch, just while I clean up the room, I somehow find it there and put it back out, and to kind of clean it all. And since Hank seems to be also back in this world.
Yeah, I mean, you can take it, add it to your personal quarters for now. You also get to choose one of the options from day work as well.
Yes. I think, let's see. Something about the figs again. A question. Let's see. Yeah, just basically like, has Scotland Yard been, has there been any reporting in the newspapers that Scotland Yard has gotten somewhat closer to finding Patrick Fig?
No, but you will read a story about essentially there are small farms that are like kind of just on the outskirts of the city, like kind of small little like community garden farm situations, right? This was pretty common in Victorian era London. And there have been reports of minor reports of bales of hay going missing. It's not something anybody else would notice, but you notice because of because of your focus on the figs.
Is that a clue?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
It is indeed. And let's continue on. Let's talk about Hargrave House. Let's talk about the basement. The basement is cluttered with the belongings of long dead hunters who used to live in Hargrave House. What do you take from it? Add it to your personal quarters.
I think that Ambrose has down there a mirror which does not show a reflection.
Nice.
I think there's a map of like a prominent house, a mansion of some type with secret entrances marked on it.
Nice. You get to take that and put it in your PQ.
I think Green finds a riding whip, like a riding whip. Yeah.
Nice. Good. So, what's everyone doing tonight? Mr. Quinn, how are you spending your evening?
I think I still want to go find Mr. Nelson. I'm like single-minded about it.
Where specifically are you going to go?
I'm gonna try to like follow the little threads, whether I can see them or not, I guess, and just like navigate through the city until I find him. So like
Okay,
stalking the spider, basically.
I like that. That's good. Yeah. What about you, Green?
I think Green is going to check out these farms where the hay is gone missing.
And Ambrose, are you going to Made Flesh manifest tonight?
I am going to manifest, and I am equally intrigued by the gardens themselves as I am by the monster that may or may not be there. So I think I'm going to go and visit the gardens.
Good. Get to have a little experience with the tactile.
That's right.
I like it. Very good. All right, let's talk about the unseen. Just take a look at our okay, good. Let's do a drink at the Four Magpies. This is on the second to last row, very, very far right side, a drink at the Four Magpies. I will note here that on our safety tab, we do have homophobia as a line. So just when we're doing this one, just be mindful of that. But let's read it. The Four Magpies is a pub popular with working class gay men, run by the butch landlady Polly O'Donnell. While it seems like any other cramped, rowdy, spit and sawdust pub, it is an oasis of relative safety in a dangerous city. Polly does what she can to protect her boys. There are a few small rooms available upstairs, and some of the lads make a bit of extra coin entertaining wealthier guests. Paint the scenes for everyone. Prompt 2 is for Alicia. Prompt 3 is for Adrian. Prompt 4 is for David. And with all that said, let's take a 5-minute break and do the night phase. We'll get back. The Four Magpies. Everyone, describe a moment we see of men sharing a moment of intimacy that might be unwise to do elsewhere.
I think we see one of the men giving the others breath mints, kind of placing them into their mouths.
I think that you see a couple sitting at a table having a meal, and one of them has like a little food in their like beard and mustache, and the other like leans over to like wipe it away with their thumb.
I think there's a table where there's a couple who, as they're eating their meal, they just like interlace their fingers across the table from each other, but have it above board.
Mr. Quinn, the silvery thread is a little tricky because ever since you visited the Fragrant Void, You see these silvery threads all over the place. You've become newly sensitive to them. I'm curious what makes Mr. Nelson's different.
I think it has a smell like dirt and the open air and cowboy-y things. It doesn't smell like London.
So it's almost like traces of old Mr. Nelson, essentially, right? Yeah, interesting. I would like the night move to successfully navigate. What are you afraid is going to happen if you fail right now?
I mean, I'm afraid that I won't be able to find him, that I'll lose. Actually, I think I'm most afraid that I will lose it forever, to be honest. Like,
I think it's worse than that. It's worse than that. You will lose the thread and you will lose your memory of Mr. Nelson.
oh boy. Okay.
You're going to roll sensitivity. And I think because you have the blood of Julius, it's totally interfering with this right now. Julius just keeps bubbling up, quite literally, in you. So disadvantage, sensitivity, take it away.
So that's 4. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do.
Hold that thought.
Okay.
Creed. No, Green, we're going to do last. Let's go to Mr. Silvestris. Mr. Silvestris, you're manifesting. What's that like?
Yeah, since we just added the items thanks to the description of the house, I think specifically like gets to be around dusk time, and if Ambrose in his bust state had hands, he would rub them together, but instead he just sort of shimmies and says, like, oh, let's try this out. I wonder where I left that. And then, like, in the basement, this mirror just sort of like shakes on a box somewhere where it's been gathering dust. And then it stands upright, and where an image of someone would then be reflected in it, instead it is like projected outward, and his body is from like the feet up, just sort of assembles itself. Finally, like, his clothes almost floating a little bit, just floop, and the gravity has returned, and he is physical once again.
I love it. Green. You'll probably have to take a cab to reach these little farms on the outskirts of the city. It's a bit of a hike.
Yes.
And you're there. And essentially what it is, it's like it's like basically like a community garden, except it's like livestock, right? So it's just like lots of people with like lots of little stalls with like sheep and pigs and things, right? But there are also it's like a farm in miniature, right? Everything's just like smaller, just the quantities are smaller, right? It's very muddy, it's very filthy. At night, the place changes a little bit to just be like kind of the workers and the locals just sort of like drinking and like kind of relaxing at the end of the evening. And you can hear the animals sort of like making noises and clucking and whatnot inside their little habitations. What do you do?
I think Green will just kind of walk through there, looking left and right, and really just stroll. So now there are no other visitors or something here. Is that, yeah? Okay, so I think then Green will tell the cab driver to kind of, can you wait around here? Can you wait for a few moments?
He will.
And then I think Green kind of strolls through like passing by these different places where there are probably some sheep or some pigs, maybe a cow, and really just looks at them and tries to figure out where would they keep the hay around here.
Come back to that. Let's go to the Four Magpies. Alicia, Curtis Jackson is a young barrow boy who has heard rumors of the Four Magpies but never visited before. How do we see him make his first nervous steps inside? And how is he drawn in?
So I think that you see him sort of hanging around close, but not too close, but enough to like watch what's going on as people are entering. And he watches like that for a while. And at one point in time, the door swings open and you see another like younger man in there who he seems to recognize. And they smile at each other. And so that's when he sort of like finally gets up the courage to go in the door.
Mr. Quinn, as you're wandering the streets of London, you're having a hard time remembering what you're even doing. What are you even doing right now? You find yourself in kind of a hard East London neighborhood. I'm curious what around here simultaneously excites you and repulses you.
I think that I see some like younger sex workers like hanging out in the door, like two young men, and I it's like a flashback to my own first days without like breaking the rules too much. Like it brings on fond memories, but they're dressed in not very nice clothing. They have like the violence of their job is kind of like marked on their bodies in ways that don't allow you to forget about that, and it makes me turn away.
Mr. Nelson is slipping away from your memory unless you mark the Janus mask. In fact, I'm going to twist the knife even more here. Your memory of Mr. Nelson will be replaced by Julius.
Well, that just sells it. I was really torn. I was really torn. Poor Mr. Quinn is trying so hard to hold on to the last remnants of his humanity.
I think you see a cowboy hat pointing down, and he looks up, and it's Julius underneath the cowboy hat.
The rage of that would push me to mark a mask anyways. So I'm going to mark the darkened threshold.
Oh, what does that do?
That I have to narrate a scene during which people treat me like I'm nothing special.
Oh, interesting. That could happen right now, in fact.
Yeah, I can do that.
We'll save it for next time. We'll save it for the next round. But I like where you're going with this. I'm not going to add anything else to the outcome of the last move. You will get a chance to, at the end, to investigate Mr. Nelson, but we'll just hold that thought for now. Okay, so since we're doing some wandering around the city, Mr. Silvestris, I just would like a montage before you arrive at Cremorne Gardens, because you are walking about in a very different London than you recall. Just give us a little montage. What's that like?
Yeah, he's also dressed just a tiny bit absurdly for what he's doing. He's his robes on the bust, you couldn't see the color. It's not a painted bust, it's just a simple sort of alabaster bust. And his robes are like this very rich, beautiful red with like gray, but sort of like a shiny, silken gray trim. He's got, of course, like a little bit of ruffles around his collar, around his hands. He's got this, now you can see, quite ostentatious hat. And his clothes are very medieval period, and he looks like an absolute buffoon out here. I think as soon as he takes his form, there's just sort of this montage of him, like, walking out the door, walking down the street, like everybody just sort of like slow double takes. But he like walks as if he knows where he's going. And he also like his hand is like almost always out and just sort of tracing along the buildings, almost like a child might, as he's sort of feeling his way along and like looking around and taking in all the smells. And like there's like a bit where he's like walking through a street where they've clearly been like throwing waste, and he just like takes a big breath and just like keeps on happily walking, just so delighted to have those senses again. And then there's finally like the final glimpse is him showing up at the front gate to Cremorne Gardens, dressed as he is, his boots a bit muddier and smellier now, but that's where he is.
I love it. Good. Green, you said you were looking around for where they might store the hay, and I think you go into a little barn, and you realize that in the hayloft above you, Green, there's someone up in the hayloft. You can hear them scuttling around. What do you do?
I think Green will try to get closer to catch, like see if they can see who is there.
You will notice a boy, small, pale, staring down at you from the shadows of the hayloft. It's unclear if he knows you can see him, but I'll let you decide what you do.
I think Green says like, "Come out, boy. I won't hurt you."
He crawls forward and says,
"This is no place for a child in the night."
he says, "If I were you, I'd be more scared for you than me. I have nothing to fear here."
Then Green staggers back and kind of puts their hand on the riding whip at their side. What are you doing here? Who are you?
He smiles and says, "Mrs. Brathwaite lets me come to the city. I've run out of food at her home in the country."
So is it food that you're seeking? I can get you some food.
Perhaps
We have
you
more
don't
than
have
enough
to.
at Hargrave House.
He says, you have everything I need right here.
Green kind of looks at his pockets and kind of with his hands pats his pockets, pats the pockets and says, I'm afraid I don't have anything to eat on me.
No, but you do in you. And you feel the tip of your tongue splitting open. And your mouth is filled with blood. And blood from your split tongue begins dribbling down your chin. Please make the night move. What are you afraid is going to happen if you fail or lose your nerve?
I think Green might bleed out here next to the hay.
I think that you will be bled out very fast by the child. Roll with sensitivity and yeah, just sensitivity.
Okay. Is this kind of like is there, does it make sense to try to defend here with any weapon that I have?
Sure, yeah.
Like, yeah, okay, yeah. So I think I'm gonna use the riding whip to kind of keep the child away.
Oh, I see. Okay, good. Yeah. I like that. Roll the advantage. Let's see how it goes if you mark it.
That's a 9 on the dice, and I think my sensitivity is 0. Is it? Yes, 9.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Four Magpies. Adrian, a well-dressed toff, enters the pub, clearly cruising for trade, which eager lads compete, good-naturedly or otherwise, for his attention, and who just scoffs at him.
I think there's 2 young men that get up. They look identical, appear to be twins, and they are dressed also in at least like clean white shirts, and they go towards this person and say, one of them says, I think we have what you're looking for. And in the background, this kind of older man looks at the two, eager to get in front of the line, and shakes his head and says, like, you're not what he's looking for.
Mr. Quinn, how does Julius's blood react inside you being here in this place, which is very much his kind of place, right? This is Julius's kind of part of town. How does it react? How does it make you react? How do you feel?
I think I feel like a bubbling lust inside, and it's like a mixture of like a feeding lust, like an urge. I think there is that little bit of urge maybe to consume, mixed with like a sexual lust, and it's hard to kind of like separate the two of them.
Did you want to do your Janus mask?
Sure, yeah. What was it again? I forgot now.
A darkened threshold.
Right, yes. Narrate a scene during which people like treat you like you're nothing special. And so I think that it's seeing these two young men hanging out in the doorstep trying to ply their trade sort of like sends me to a flashback of like a scene in a brothel, and it's not the kind of thing that you would normally find Mr. Quinn in. It's very much more working class, it's low class, and there's this like row of young men lined up, and Mr. Quinn is amongst them, and a woman, a very high class woman, is like walking down the row, sort of inspecting each of them. She's got kind of like Theodora vibes, if you will. And you know, she's kind of like, she reaches out and she touches them. She kind of like feels them up and down, makes them turn around, literally like surveying them. And she gets to Mr. Quinn and she reaches out and she like uses her thumb to like drag across my lips before kind of wrinkling her nose and just moving along the line.
Mr. Quinn, leading into the next part, I'll just say that you turn a corner and you look above and connecting two buildings above the alley is spider webs. And you see in the spider webs a person frightened, alive, begging you for help. And we'll come back to that in a moment. Mr. Silvestris, you arrive at Cremorne Gardens. Cremorne Gardens is, as I've previously been describing over the course of the campaign, you know, except at night, it's absolutely packed with people. There are literally thousands of people on the dancing platform, stomping and whirling and doing everything they're doing. The music is playing wildly. There's a shooting gallery. There's, you know, the promenades lit with these emerald glass, you know, gas lights, all this stuff. It's just alive. What do you do?
Everything. I think, Ambrose is going to talk his way or pay his way or snag some coin from someone and pay his way, whatever he has to do to get in here. And then he is going to do everything with extreme gusto.
Good. I love it. Do you want to give us a little montage there as well?
Yeah. So the previous montage, which I like to imagine it's like one of those where, you know, it was like a him walking and the camera was, you know, like steady, but like the background kept changing as he was like moving through different places. And this is like the same sort of thing, only it's like, you know, in one, he's leaning over and he's, you know, taking a pot shot, a very poor shot. I don't think he obviously hasn't handled a rifle in quite some time if he ever has. So that's fun for him. You know, there's him like just sort of like dancing, but like all of his dance moves are just radically different than everyone else on the dance floor, because he knows nothing. He has no concept of how they're dancing these days. And there's like him approaching the maze and just like same thing as before. He's sort of like dragging his hand through the bushes as he like goes through and does the maze in the gardens. Just like a little montage of him going through and trying all the activities. And I think he's like just like really grinning ear to ear the whole time.
I love it. Thank you. Green, give me the scene. How do you keep the Limehouse Lurker at bay?
I think quite simply by using the riding whip to really kind of push the child back for a moment and then just running off towards the carriage to the cab.
As you run out of the barn, you look back and notice a young woman who probably works at the farm going into the barn where the Limehouse Lurker is, presumably to continue her work for the evening or to wrap up her work. What do you do?
I think I'm gonna use the My Person Friday move.
Very good. Let's read it, since I think it's the first time we've done it here. It says, once per session, you can appear in any scene at any time, ready for action. If there's an object or tool that would be helpful, you have it. Add to your personal quarters.
So I think I have something like a sateen bag, maybe that Green made out of the sapphire fabric. And I think they kind of slowly move back, like when they feel the lurker is not following. I think they slowly move back towards the barn and then slip in there while the lurker is focused on that young woman, and then try to put that over the child's head.
Nice. I like it. Yeah, that's good. We'll come back to that. We'll see how that goes. Our last stop at the Four Magpies. David, at last orders are called and people start to file out of the pub. How do we see Polly looking after her customers with words or actions where needed?
I think that she works with a local cab company that's rather discreet, that can help her customers, whether it be because they're thoroughly inebriated or whether it be because they are together in a way that perhaps outside of her bar it would be more difficult for them to be that way. I think she works with this local cab company to get them rides to wherever they need to go. And I think that the company in question is the same which Green has been riding with this evening as he's been going to do his investigation.
Mr. Quinn, you can see the rows of glittering eyes in the darkness above this victim hanging in the spider webs above you. What do you do?
Ooh, I got that lust a bubbling, that bloodlust. I'm just going to whisper, Mr. Nelson, Hank, at the glittering eyes and see what happens.
Mr. Nelson is going to feed on the victim in front of you. If you just let it happen, I'm gonna make you scar your reflection, but I'll give you a clue for free.
Yeah, I'm gonna let it happen.
Very good. We see it. You see the four limbs. They reach down. They almost like caress the victim. There's something. Actually, you tell me. Everybody tell me. Let's paint the scene. How is this feasting upon the victim almost sensual or erotic?
I think that it kind of continues to wind it slowly in webs, like a little BDSM, like tying it up.
I think the opening cut on the body is like done by a mandible, like drawn slowly, almost gently along their neck, a thin bead of blood at first, traced along.
I think that the legs are kind of holding and caressing the body, turning it around under the clothes, like getting under the clothes, and then we can see them moving there.
The victim is carefully dismembered and feasted upon. And you're watching. As you scar the reflection, Mr. Quinn, how is the statue changing?
I think that it's almost like tiny little fine spider hairs start to like pop up on pieces of the statue.
I love it. And here's your clue. You'll notice all around, on either side of the walls in this alley, very similar to my background actually, narrower perhaps, the walls are painted with murals. Murals of a symbol that were important to Mr. Nelson in life, but connected to the transformation. David, what is it, perhaps?
Interesting. I think that the symbol is just also tying in the element with the railroad spike and all that. I think it's just there's been a mural painted of like a train going across some scenery. And that's so reminiscent to Hank and of his experiences out west.
So we shall call the clue murals of scenes out west, back west. Fantastic. How does it make you feel, Mr. Quinn?
Alive in a way I haven't felt in a long time.
Interesting. Mr. Silvestris, a free clue. A free clue from your revelry. No roll required. An argument, a vicious argument between Thomas and Abigail Simpson, the proprietor and manager, respectively, of Cremorne Gardens. It is a knockdown, drag-out, angry argument. You aren't sure exactly what it's about, but I am curious how you intervene.
I think they're having it out. They're at like a corner of where a few of the different paths meet and divert to go to different parts of the gardens. And there's like a flickering lamp there of a gas lamp there on the corner. And this is towards the edge of the garden, so it's there's not a lot of foot traffic through here. And I think, at first just the two of them in view, and they're arguing and they're getting louder, and like it's hushed tones at first, but it's getting louder. And then like, how there's like a blur because of the focus of the lens, and then it focuses a little bit more to the background, and you see Ambrose just there with a turkey leg, just sort of sitting there on a bench as this unfolds. And I think like when there's like it almost seems like they might come to blows over it. I think Ambrose stands up and excuse lungs. Excuse me. Are you I probably shouldn't be here right now. Do you need space or privacy?
Abigail looks at you and she says, they're getting ready to start they're getting ready to start the medieval jousting show. What are you doing over here? You need to go find your mark.
I was impaled.
She rolls her eyes and turns away and stomps off.
And like Ambrose to himself, still got it. Yes. All right.
Very good.
So quick question: who stomped off and who remained?
Oh, they both left. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
Green. You go back into the barn and you see this young woman floating in the air, suspended in the air, as if suspended from a spider web, but there's no spider web. And you see the Limehouse Lurker standing beneath her, back turned. What do? You said you were going to try to grab him.
Put this bag over their head.
To accomplish what? To like kidnap
So,
them? Or
yeah, I think the point is, the best outcome would be to actually kidnap the child, and if that seems impossible, then, or if that doesn't work, then trying to get that woman out of there while
I think kidnapping the child is
might
perfectly
be,
fine. He's not an active threat, so you
Yeah.
can totally do that. Give me I think it's going to be vitality with, and if you're marking the item, you can roll at advantage.
Yes. That's a 9 on the dice. Yeah, that's it. 9.
You're going to succeed. I think you're going to succeed. I think the difficulty, the complication is going to be quite simply that Theodora wants him back, right? And so it's just going to be an ongoing problem. But go ahead and describe it. What do you do?
So the woman is kind of also in spider webs.
No, she's just floating.
There? No, she's just floating. Okay.
Yeah.
So I think Green has this kind of larger bag of sapphire fabric and puts it over the head of the child and kind of ties it around and throws the child to the ground for a moment. And then they try to get that woman and kind of see if there's any way that she can get to safety. And if that seems to be the case, I think Green will grab the child and
Yeah, I
run
think
back
she'll
to
just fall down into the pile of hay or whatever and be fine. Once you grab the Limehouse Lurker, who I guess you're bringing him back to Hargrave House. Is that the plan?
Yes.
Great. Trade one vampire for another. And we'll end the night phase there. Let's go to our dawn. All right. No rewards yet. Dawn questions. We're not getting the first two, but we'll start with echoes in the night. Green, did you experience an echo in the night?
Think so.
Did you subtly express sexual desire for your employee or employer rather in the way you dress them or serve them?
No.
Did you demonstrate obsequious behavior toward your employer in front of others? Yes, you did do that.
I think so, yeah, when I told them he's the head of Hargrave House.
Mr. Quinn, did you experience an echo in the night?
I did, with the thumb and the lips.
Very good. Did you express a clear preference for the beautiful over the mundane?
I tried to with the sage thing and how sage was not an acceptable color.
Yeah, I'm into that. Yeah. Did you appear in London society wearing risque or avant-garde fashion?
It was for me. I was angling for a different approach here, like wearing Hank's things and like people knowing that wouldn't be my shtick. And I did pair it with the outrageous makeup.
I'm not sure if you appeared in society though. I think the
Fair
society
enough.
is the tricky
I mean, I
part.
did go see the judge. He's kind of society.
Yeah, kind of. I don't know.
That's fair.
I don't think it was quite like the level of like shock value that we want there. Mr. Sylvestris, did you experience an echo in the night?
Yes, I tied in the cab company from Green's thing.
Did you luxuriate in the tactile? Yes, you did. You did luxuriate in the tactile. Did you give someone a fright? I guess it depends on how Green received you. Green, were you given a fright? Or
I think so at the beginning.
yeah. If you're okay with that, David, I think that's probably suitable for that one.
Sure.
And that's the only thing I could think of while I was thinking about it anyway. Very good. And let's continue on. You can mark New Dawn questions if you wish. Resolving moves. There are no moves to resolve. I don't think there are any Janus Mass prompts to resolve either. So that concludes our session. Let's do Stars and Wishes. Kind of a condensed session, but it was fun. I'll start. I really enjoyed the introduction of Mr. Sylvestris. It was lighter, which I thought was interesting. This session felt very like transitional in a way, kind of transitioning from like what was happening before to like what's going to be happening. And so it was an interesting session in that way, just sort of its transitional feel, which I thought was interesting. I love how My Person Friday affects it really kind of changes the factotum into a heroic character, which I think is an interesting angle, and it's how I wrote it. I wrote it to be that way. And it's just kind of fun to see that. And it's always fun to see Green doing what Green does, because Green does tend to sort of like push into places where Hargrave House maybe isn't, which I think is always interesting to see. Enjoyed all the stuff with the connection between Mr. Quinn and Mr. Nelson. That felt very just kind of continuing the emotion of that last session, sort of like carrying through it today. I thought that was great. Getting Julius in the mix is always fun. And yeah, I had a good time. Those are my stars.
I'd love to throw a star for Green. I love, because as you mentioned, like the factotum sort of has this role of this servant of the house, particularly of Mr. Quinn in our case. But I think it can be almost as if on some days, Green isn't so much an agent of Hargrave House. Green is doing unrelated matters. But then other times Green goes out and stops a vampire and brings them home. And so I really like how that development's happening. I think that's been really fun to see fluctuate.
I also have a star for Green, which is that I feel like there's been a slow ramping up of the competency of Green. Not that he was ever incompetent by any stretch of the imagination, but that they are like, I don't know, I feel like they're taking on more agency in a way and doing more things for themselves and less things sort of for me and maybe even for Hargrave House. Even though they're pushing it on behalf of Hargrave House, it feels more like ego drawn, like Green is out there for themselves now, which I don't know. I just don't know if that's intentional or not, but I feel like I see it and I really like it. And also, yes, star for some levity after our extremely emotional last session to this hilarious Muppet bust, which I love.
I definitely wanted Ambrose to be in stark contrast to how Hank had just departed. So,
but I like that because of the way Hank left, leaving us with the cursed threat. Like it's like Hank is still in the story, right? Just like in a different way, which I find really fascinating. It's kind of fun to see play out. Of all the threats, this is the one I've run the least, just because it comes up in such a particular way. So it's kind of fun. I had to do a lot of adaptation because the threat as written assumes it's a werewolf. And so I had to do a lot of like improvising to make a spider work, but I think it came out okay. So yeah.
Star to that. I think you've done a great job with that. And Star, I would say to Alicia as well. Just I love this Mr. Quinn hunts for his humanity sort of angle to this story, where it's like holding on to Hank because like if Hank is gone, then what does that mean for Mr. Quinn? I don't know. I really like how that's turning out. But then also like just sort of standing there letting this guy get murdered and just like, this is nice. This is a nice evening out on the town.
Yeah, I think that's so. Also, Star to that and to the way I think that it's interesting because Quinn seems to also go out like on his own, which leaves Green to kind of see what to do. And I think one of the things that came out now is that basically Green might kind of stick to these threads that people like the rest of Hargrave House kind of doesn't care about anymore, and then they kind of follow up on their own and somehow get themselves in dangerous situations. So I think that's kind of the thing here. Another star, I think, for lots of like the themes of both the spider and the blood, I think were very strong today. So especially with Julius as well. Yeah, so I like that.
Star for how much Julius enrages me all the time. I brought that guy into this house and boy, do I fucking hate him, and he will not leave me alone, but I love it.
Yeah, and Fragrant Void Julius is even like, he's more chaotic. You know, it's just like a pure chaos creature, which I think is great. My wish, obviously I'll be excited to have Mr. Tallerford back in the mix, and so that'll be great. I am curious to see how the Unquiet continues to develop as a member of Hargrave House, and that'll be very fascinating. One thing that happened in this session, which I didn't explicitly call out, but because you went up to 10 mastermind clues in the middle of the session, that's why the Limehouse Lurker attacked, because now I'm able to, right? So Theodora gets to make direct attacks against you from here on out until you confront her. So that'll be fun to see as well. So yeah. This was just happenstance though, because I noted that the farms are on the outskirts of the city. So they're kind of essentially between London and Theodora's manor, right? And so this is just a place for the Lurker to go feed, right? And it just happened to be that that's where the Green ended up. So yeah. And now he's kidnapped. So I'll be curious to see how that goes too. That's another wish. What is that going to be a thing? This much more. His time with Theodora has made him more vicious, it seems, and more predatory. So I don't think I have anything else. Any other stars and wishes?
I have a wish, just since we'll have Mr. Tallerford next time. I'm very curious to see how interaction between Ambrose and Tallerford goes, because I am one of those spirits that is there, and I wonder if he's like known I've been in the house.
I wonder. Yeah,
I don't know. I'm curious to see
Yeah.
how we'll play that out. So
Yeah, same. And I also think it's interesting that we have like that Green has the ghost of Hargrave House move, and now there's a ghost of Hargrave House. Two ghosts of Hargrave House, which I think is fun. Fabulous. Okay, well, if there's nothing else, then I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.